Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I did a video a while back about a crazy situation in Michigan where if you were behind on your taxes, the local taxing authority could auction off your house to pay themselves the taxes they were owed and then just keep the leftover money. And it was a crazy situation, but the law allowed them to do that. And it was kind of strange. But it got to the point where some municipalities were actually raising a substantial portion of their money to operate by doing this. They built this into their budget. So if you owed, say, $100 in back taxes and you had a $250,000 home, they'd seize your home, sell it to pay themselves $100 in back taxes, and they'd keep the leftover money. And just a windfall, a surplus. So somebody took this case up to the Michigan Supreme Court. The Michigan Supreme Court said, that's insane. You can't do that. And basically struck the law down. So that raises the question about what about all the people who'd had this happen to them recently. Their house was sold at foreclosure. They paid the taxes with it, but then they also lost all of the equity they had in the house. So it's happening. It's happening. Finally, someone's come around to unwind some of these. Harriet sent me the story from WWMT News Channel 3. Mike Kravchuk wrote it out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. Foreclosed homeowner's son files suit to force Kalamazoo County to pay up on tax sale. And the previous video I did, I mentioned about how the politicians were all turning on each other, all blaming each other for this mess. None of them wanted to admit that they liked the idea when it was working or that they were behind the idea when it got passed. But in 2019, the Kalamazoo County Treasurer's Office seized William Crispin's home in Kalamazoo Township for $14,500 of overdue property taxes. Now, he died of cancer in February of this year, but his son said his father did fall behind on his mortgage for years and hadn't told anybody. So he said, we didn't know he hadn't paid the taxes in a while. We tried to make payments, do whatever we could, but it wasn't enough. So the property is sold for $79,500. Now, remember, he only owed $14,500. So there was $65,000 left over, which the county just kept. Pocketed the money. It's a surplus. Thank you. So that practice would have been legal, except that the Michigan Supreme Court ruled in July of this year that counties cannot keep the surplus they get after selling a tax foreclosed home at an auction without compensating the individual from whom the property was taken. And this makes complete sense. Otherwise, people are being deprived of property for no reason. I mean, you take the property and you sell it. I'm talking about the money that's left over. A portion goes to pay the back taxes. Why would the surplus also go to the government? Doesn't make any sense. So there was a lawsuit filed in Oakland County, Michigan, that challenged one part of Michigan's tax foreclosure law. So now an attorney who represents this family in Kalamazoo sent a letter to the Kalamazoo County Treasurer in October requesting that the $65,000 in surplus funds be refunded to the family. And as of right now, they haven't paid that money back, so they filed a lawsuit. The attorney says there's no county that I'm aware of in Michigan that's decided they're going to repay the funds. And that appears to be the position they're taking. It's kind of like, we're going to wait and see what happens, and if people sue us, we'll deal with them on a case-by-case basis. So Crispin is now the lead plaintiff on a class action lawsuit filed by this attorney's law firm. And the claims are that Kalamazoo County and other Michigan counties have been pocketing proceeds from properties that the county forecloses and sells at auction for unpaid property taxes. If a judge rules this case can go forward, Crispin could represent an entire class of 140 law clients in 38 counties with damages of nearly $7 million, according to the firm. And that's based on cases between 2016 and 2020. The excess proceeds owed to people whose properties were foreclosed and sold at auction range between $100 and $414,000. Similar class action lawsuits have been submitted in state and federal courts on behalf of property owners in all of Michigan's 83 counties. Those class action suits, if certified, would include tens of thousands of homeowners. The attorney says for many people it was their last asset. We have one client that, as a result of losing her property, is living out of her car now. Counties that retain profit over the amount of the tax owed without compensating the previous property owners participate in an unconstitutional taking, according to the Supreme Court opinion. And most people who heard the story immediately thought that. Like, it makes sense that they can get tax money. But the other money, that made no sense. Now, that law was passed back in 1999, and it allowed county treasurers to pocket the wholesale price of auctioned properties, regardless of the amount of the delinquent tax debts. And in case you're curious, county treasurers are the ones who collect delinquent property taxes on behalf of the local communities. So if you lived, say, in Royal Oak, Michigan, and you're behind in your property taxes, the Oakland County people who would come after you for that. And then, of course, they're the ones who take the money and keep it. The Kalamazoo County Treasurer said the county generated $1.4 million from property tax foreclosures in 2020. She said she's received dozens of notices demanding repayment of tax foreclosed property sale proceeds. The Supreme Court's decision did not set a deadline for counties to repay property tax owners, but as you can imagine, the minute the ink was drying on the opinion from the Michigan Supreme Court, that money was due. That money was due and owing. And by the way, if you guys are so fast to jump on it when it's in your name, why aren't you fast to give it back when it's in someone else's name? The treasurer for Kalamazoo says they're kind of punting it to the legislature for them to make a legislative fix. Dream on. The courts are going to fix this. The courts are going to fix this right now by way of a big lawsuit that was just served and filed, et cetera, et cetera. The Kalamazoo County Treasurer said her office was waiting on a legislative fix before making the reimbursement payments. Now, there have been a couple bills approved in the legislature. And under that legislation, once a judge determines the amount owed to a claimant, the county treasurer would disperse the funds within 21 days. Anyone interested in the property could file a claim for the remaining sale proceeds after required taxes, interest, penalties, and other costs are paid. But of course, that still requires a judge to make a determination. So you have to file a lawsuit to get your money back. One of the bills called for a 2-year cap of delinquent payments being returned to property owners. The current statute, of course, allows for 6 years. So if a 2-year cap got passed, then there's a bunch of people who lose out. Critics, of course, are calling a 2-year cap provision unfair. I would also like to call it unfair. The attorney says, I think it would be an inappropriate legislative remedy and it would probably be challenged in court. Yeah, and, the counties got all this money over these years. It's windfalls, surpluses, free money. They sue somebody, they get a little bit of money that they're owed, and they take the rest of the money just as a windfall. And like I said, there were counties that had actually built it into their budget. The money we're going to spend next year. Here's what we're going to get from property taxes. Here's what we're going to get from these. Here's what we're going to get from surpluses from tax foreclosures. And they got the point where they're building that into their budgets. And it's kind of like how the police build into their budgets money they get from civil asset forfeiture. So that if someone says, hey, you got to stop doing that, they go, we're not going to be able to afford to operate anymore. Well, how'd you operate before? And so how did the counties operate before? And the biggest problem, and I've said this before, is that when politicians have a source of income, a revenue stream, they hate to see somebody talk about shutting it off. But here's one that's been shut off. Okay, the Supreme Court said you cannot have that money anymore. So they got to figure out going forward how they're going to run their counties without this source of income. But worse, they got to pay back money that they got at least for the last 2 years if that bill gets passed, but possibly as far back as 6 years. 6 years. And as this particular lawsuit points out, this guy represents people who only are owed $7 million. And that's one lawsuit, but there are other lawsuits, and it appears there's been lawsuits filed pretty much in every county in the state of Michigan. There's 83 counties. So it's going to put a dent in a lot of these counties' operating budgets to pay this money back. But that doesn't mean that you can say, okay, I guess we can't pay it back then. Yes, you can. Unfortunately, you can. And so if you go back to 1999, in your heads. I remember when this bill got passed that allowed this. I remember this. And this shows you one of the problems. It's not with the legal system per se. It's actually a problem with cross between politics and society and how our government works and how our culture works. But when the bill got passed in 1999 that said municipalities can foreclose on properties to get their taxes paid and keep the leftover. A lot of people looked and said, wait, that makes no sense. And that can't be constitutional, right? I mean, huh? And so I remember the debate at the time among attorneys talking about that, going, that's crazy. That's crazy. Now, I practice in the field of lemon law. I don't handle tax foreclosure cases. So I never even had anybody approach me and ask me about it. Never, not that. But I know other attorneys who have. Over the years, I remember talking to attorneys who said, Steve, are you aware of this law? Yes, I am. Got passed in 99. It's insane. It can't be constitutional. And it took 21 years before somebody actually had the right case to take it up to our Supreme Court and have our Supreme Court go, no, that's wrong. So there was a law on the books for 21 years that was unconstitutional. And now people going back 6 years should be able to get their money back. Whether they'll all get it back, we don't know. The legislature might limit it to 2 years, but of course that limitation then could be litigated. And the question then becomes, the people in the preceding 4 years would potentially have an argument to go up to our Supreme Court again and say, explain to me why this legislature can cap my ability to get my money back when it's taken from me wrongfully under an unconstitutional statute. And so one of the things that people do talk about in the comments below my videos, this comes up a lot, is people say, how come it takes so long for the Supreme Court to weigh in on an obviously bad statute? And the problem is, the way our system works, is legislatures pass bills. We know how that works. Just a bill up on Capitol Hill. And then we have an executive branch that signs bills into law, or there's other ways that can happen. We won't get into that right now. And a bill becomes effective. The Supreme Courts, both at the federal level and the state level, generally speaking, don't just look at laws and render opinions. And that just is custom that goes back to the beginning of our court systems. Because a couple things. One is so many laws get passed that they'd be doing nothing but reviewing laws. But number two, it's hard to look at some laws and guess where the problems are going to be. And I got news for you. The blue books behind me are the law books in the state of Michigan. And it's a complete set. There's 4 piles there. And the laws can be quite convoluted. And I can tell you that I know many people who've read the lemon law in Michigan. They call me and say, hey, Steve, I got a problem. And they describe to me a problem, and they explain to me how they've interpreted the lemon law. And they might have a fair interpretation of it, but that's not how our courts have interpreted it. And so the courts interpret it when it's brought to them with a specific problem. They say, here's a problem we have. How does that fit with the statute? But it's extremely hard to simply look at a statute and go, oh, I see where all the problems are going to be. That would be a problem, that would be a problem, that would be a problem. So instead they say, we're going to wait till people bring us the specific problems. Now, I know what you're going to say. Steve, in this case, it was obvious. It was obvious. It was. And there have been other laws that get passed where the attorneys immediately go, oh, there's a problem. But as many of you will also point out, many legislators are attorneys. So many of them must know that these problems are baked into these laws the moment they're passed. They must know that. I don't know what to tell you. But in this example, this law was on the books for 21 years, and the Michigan Supreme Court struck it down and said that law is unconstitutional, can't do that. And now people who've had this happen to them, at least in the last 6 years, should be lining up to get their money back. Another reason, however, it might not have been litigated previous to this, in case you're curious, is the man mentioned of the clients he had, some of them had claims for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and someone had a claim for as small as $100. $100. So the county owes you $100. I'm not going to give it to you. You can sue them. Guess what the filing fee is in any court in our country? They're all over $100. Now, it's true. If you win, you might get your filing fee back. But do you want to risk a $150 filing fee in the hopes of getting your $100 back? Most people don't, especially when the counties have a law department and full-time attorneys on staff whose job it is to fight your claim. So instead of passing a bill saying, if you want your money back, file a lawsuit and you're capped at 2 years, they should actually pass a bill that says, if you took money in a surplus in the last 6 years, notify the people that you took the money from, that they've got surplusage coming back to them, and work out a process to just pay the money back. Be the fair way to do it, right? So I can dream. That's me not speaking as an attorney, but just speaking as a person. So Harriet, thank you very much for the story from WWMT News Channel 3. Mike Kravchuk wrote it. Foreclosed homeowner's son files suit to force Kalamazoo County to pay up on tax sale. And better yet, it's phrased, it's couched as a class action, and therefore it could be doing good for a whole bunch of people. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law.
"Why do you want this job?" my friend was asked. She replied, "I've always been passionate about not starving to death."